with another live for you. We're going to talk about the Saturn in Aquarius transit that has been happening and how Saturn has just turned direct. So, with Saturn moving direct, this is a message to me about peer pressure and privilege. And these are some concepts that I am going to be diving more into on my channel because of this transit and because of other things that I've been talking about on this channel. So definitely, if you like the idea of merging, like life with astrology, come join me on the channel because I have various topics where we're really going to dive into privilege because it's on a soul level that we need to understand the power of privilege and the responsibility of privilege. But I wanted to talk to you guys today about Saturn going direct. So when Saturn is moving in a retrograde motion, it becomes more self-corrective. People who are born with the Saturn retrograde, like myself, you typically are really harsh on yourself, more critical on yourself. And so if you've gone through the transit, you may have experienced that as well. You may have experienced more self-criticism, more self-correction, which is actually a lot of fun dealing with Saturn, in which because Saturn is karmic and we usually resist Saturn going backwards lessens the resistance. It lessens the issues. You may have dealt with some certain authority figures who thought that they got one up on you, but during the retrograde, but if you were doing that self-corrective action from Saturn retrograde, then you're able to handle the karma probably in a better way if Saturn was going direct. So now that Saturn is moving direct, that energy is now going to be a little bit more challenging, right? Because when Saturn is in its direct motion, this is usually where the challenge and the discipline and the pressure comes from. It comes from external factors. So you'll be now taking everything that you experienced and learned and self-corrected and reapplying it as Saturn goes direct. So what are the themes that I think you should be mindful of during the Saturn direct phase is the themes of peer pressure, okay? So Saturn moving now in Aquarius brings up more connections to friendships, groups, and networks, and your role and responsibility in those groups and networks. And there's this finesse, this grace that we're always trying to find where we can maintain our autonomy, our sense of self, and also merge with group thinking. Because it is with group thinking and group work that we're able to make a really big, industrious, progressive move forward for the entire generation. So we're trying to find that beautiful grace where we can still be ourselves, still hold our own values and morals, but also merge with the group thought process. And with Saturn being here, Saturn brings up more themes of peer pressure. Okay, and peer pressure is something that we consider typically only in our youth, but peer pressure is something that occurs across the spectrum of our lives, right? So I'd love to know, if you're tuning in, where do you have Saturn and Aquarius in your chart? Because where you have Saturn and Aquarius in your chart is where you may be experiencing some peer pressure. And we're going to go through the houses and we're going to talk about that peer pressure and how it might look like in the houses, right? But definitely also help us all, because I just have my perspective, my way. But share in the comments, share with others, what is that peer pressure that you feel like you're dealing with now that Saturn is moving forward and really putting a little bit more pressure on you to make a change, make a shift that allows you to find that grace, that place where you're autonomous, but also merging with the group, because you're going to need the group. You can't go alone if you want to make a big movement. You can't do it alone. And this transit is showing us what we need to find that perfect balance. Okay, cool. Hello, Urban Goddess Tarot. Kim Ranson, Virgo is in the 6th house. Virgo and Saturn in the 6th house. Okay, that's your natal placement. But right now, I'm not asking for your natal placement. What I'm asking for is, where is Aquarius in your chart? Okay, because Aquarius in your chart is where Saturn is going to be transiting. Hi, Geechee Goddess. Saturn transiting 1st house. Urban Goddess says Saturn is in her 7th house. Yeah, so peer pressure can happen through the role players and the individuals that you're going to be dealing with. And certain placements are going to be many people, and certain places are going to, you know what? I'm going to take that back. Because it's Aquarius, it could be many people on all placements, because you can still have pressure even in the seventh house. Even though the seventh house is considered that one-on-one, you can still have pressure from the people around you, the friends and groups around you, to choose a one-on-one, right? So peer pressure is still available. So before I go through the houses and talk to you guys, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to smoke out here. Before I go through the houses and talk to you guys about peer pressure through the houses, I'd like to also talk about privilege and the varying degrees of privilege, and how this will also be a theme that shows up in Saturn and Aquarius. Why? Because we're dealing with Saturn, the planet of hierarchy, right? Who's in charge, who's the boss, who's at the top, and then Aquarius, the group. So who's the boss and who's at the top of the group? And where you are finding this Saturn direct energy in Aquarius in your chart, I'm really picking up that privilege seems to not be available for you. But in fact, it is very much the case, and that's why the energy of peer pressure is coming in. So we're really trying to find what is your degree of privilege, and the more that you are actually able to see that privilege, because you may feel more like you're restricted from the privilege, or like you're not having the thing that everybody wants you to have, to be on top. But it's not as much there as you would think. It's because of Saturn that you have to find your privilege. You have to do the hard work to seek where you are privileged. If you've ever had a situation where you've dealt with a negative mindset, I know I have. I have a moon in Gemini. That's a daily basis. Sometimes you do this thing called gratitude work, and I've struggled with that because gratitude work is not easy, and when I'm in a negative mindset, I don't really want to see what is blessing me, but it's the very act of doing that gratitude work that would help me to feel better. Well, that's the same idea here with privilege. You're going to have to do that work where you're in the mindset where you feel underprivileged, but seeking to find where you are privileged in these areas is actually going to shift the frequency more in your favor. So let's all go through the houses briefly in this talk. Please give a like or subscribe if you haven't, and also share to anybody you know who may have a Saturn return or who's interested in astrology in this depth of way of seeing it, and let them know to check Saturn. Always know what's going on with your chart with Saturn, because when things go awry, it's usually Saturn that's one of the players that you'd want to look at. So Saturn in Aquarius moving direct in the first house is dealing with the peer pressure to look and appear a certain way, and it might be connected to the groups that you're a part of, in which there's a costume that could be maybe not clearly stated but obvious, a costume that dresses up attitude and how you look, like fashion and your body shape. And I think that this is where you may be feeling the peer pressure. You may be feeling like you are not privileged in the degree of having maybe enough money to buy clothes, maybe not enough knowledge of how to actually dress yourself, or how to actually obtain the attitude that you need to have to look like you fit into this group. And so your struggle will be, your challenge will be to flip the frequency around by recognizing where you are privileged. Okay, even if you feel like you don't have the body that everyone wants you to have, how about certain people who don't even have certain body parts, and how they have had to learn how to love themselves? Seek for how you are privileged when it comes to your presentation. Maybe even the fact that you have A lot of you have clothes that you can't figure it out, but some people don't have any clothes, right? Even if you have to go very vague and very morbid, like very dark, do it so that you can align yourself with the privilege of seeing where you are privileged, okay? And there's going to be a message after all the houses where I'm going to branch off into the 7 sins and talk about what you really need to understand. So you got to stay till the end or come back to the end. Okay, so the second house, you're getting peer pressure to clearly make a certain amount of money. And it might be also related. Sorry, y'all, I'm at the train station at the park, Brooklyn, New York. All right, so second house, Saturn going direct in the second house in Aquarius. Peer pressure for money and how much money you're making so that you can look and appear to have a certain, reputation and status that would make other people value you. So there also could be the feeling like you're not privileged by the sense of feeling undervalued. And so you'll have to be challenged to see where it is that you have a lot of privilege, okay? Maybe it's recognizing that certain people don't even make certain people don't make the kind of money that you make. So even to think like, damn, I don't make enough money. What about the people who still don't even make the same amount that I make, right? If you're a person that's making your own money, but you're not making like a lot compared to somebody who's in the 9 to 5, well, damn, I'm not making the same amount of money as I was if I was in that 9 to 5 before, but at least I'm operating in the sense of I get to claim how I want to make my own money. So I have a freedom, I have a privilege in my freedom to make my own money versus somebody who has to work for somebody else. So those are just some ideas on how to work your mind to seek for the privilege, in that sense of being grateful. Thank you. Blessings, Geechee Goddess, for the $5 donation. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Okay, so for the third house, Saturn direct moving in Aquarius, this is natural friendships, maybe even like friendships from the neighborhood, a certain sense of being connected to community, and how there's a peer pressure to maybe even remain connected. So you might even be dealing with an isolation issue here with being connected to people. There's also there's a peer pressure to communicate, to stay connected to people. I feel that the privilege that might be difficult is recognizing the ability to use your language and to speak in a way that can be heard and received by others in the third house that you may feel underprivileged by. This could be somebody who may be dealing with a speech impediment temporarily, right? Or maybe recognizing that they had one that they didn't realize they had, like, wow, I really have a lisp. Or maybe an accent that is not working in your favor. So maybe you're temporarily in a different community that's pulling out, your accent. Something is pulling out of way in which you speak and listen that seems to be underprivileged. It could be somebody who's just from a different social class, so they speak slang, right? And so they may not be understood by somebody from another social class. So Saturn is working its way and wanting you to take responsibility. And so the method that I would choose is to find where you are privileged. Maybe it's an example that you're able to see that because you are having some sort of pull that seems like a speech impediment or a difficulty in understanding, that you can see how people just don't communicate with each other well. Maybe you're the one who's the one on the outside looking in. Maybe you're the one who could have a voice for a certain people that are privileged because you are privileged, if you'll see yourself as that way. So I would love for you guys, if you have Saturn and Aquarius in the third house, to try to seek for your privilege. And, comment down below what are the issues that you might be having in your communication. Now, the fourth house, this one can be interesting. The Aquarian groups might actually be like people who are connected to your ethnicity. So you might be dealing with a sense of like your country. You could be feeling like a pressure from your country, but it could also be your family. And so these are the role players that are pushing peer pressure for you in the fourth house. And so the privilege and the method of finding that privilege is going to help you by seeing maybe you're the dark horse in the family, maybe you're the one who doesn't abide by all of the rules of your cultural ethnic background or beliefs or sets. You know, maybe you're the one who's standing out a little differently, and you've got to find a way to not feel underprivileged because of that. Like if you're the dark horse in the family, or I forget what they call it, the black sheep of the family, that's the term, then maybe you're feeling like that, you're putting on that role, but there's something beautiful about that role, right? There's something very exciting for the family about that role. Like maybe you're the one in privilege because you're the one who can show them a new way of interacting with one another or building with one another. This could also be about the home, like feeling like your home is not good enough compared to others. And so if you're having Aquarius here, you might be trying to fake the funk or trying to rebuild your home so that you feel like you're a part of some sort of peer pressure to look and appear a certain way. And of course, it would also be a great example to think, well, what about the time when, I was renting? Or what about the time when I was living out of a closet? Or what about the people who still live on the streets? What about the people who lost their home in the hurricanes? So being able to recognize where you still have privilege and to understand that that degree of privilege is powerful for you. Now, in the fifth house, Saturn in Aquarius is deeply connected to your talents and your expression. So you may have a lot of peer pressure to act and to be a certain way and to have a certain type of talent that would put you, consider you to be the one that everyone would applaud and say encore and want more from you from. So you may not be getting that. You may be getting the pressure to be better at that talent. What also is happening could be on a romantic level, the pressure to be more romantic, the pressure to appear more romantic, or maybe the way that you are romantic doesn't seem to be good enough. So the privilege that you're dealing with in the fifth house is the underprivileged that you're dealing with in fifth house is not having the right talent and not being maybe romantic enough, not really being a suitable romantic dating possibility because the fifth house has that dating energy. So with that, I would say to consider the fact that this is one that's harder for me to really do. But I would say consider the fact that maybe there is something to your art that really is so much more unique for people to get. So people are judging talent in a way that you don't match, and so you feel underprivileged, but really you are showing them what true talent is, which is the sense to have a vision and to have your own unique voice versus trying to be, what they want you to be. And when it comes to romance, there might be something here that you can really lead on the true way to relate to each other in romance. And I think it has a lot more platonic energy to it because it's Aquarius, so it might feel very detached in your method, but you have a lot of privilege there because a lot of people get so attached in romance and they helicopter and they put a lot of meaning behind dating. And so you may have a very unique way in which you don't put that much meaning behind dating. Or maybe you're the type that doesn't even look at dating in the same way that many people don't. And it's actually a way that could heal and help a lot of other people. Okay, so the sixth house, Saturn here is putting a lot of pressure for you to be in a role of authority at your job. So if you don't even have a job, this is really tough energy to deal with. But it also could be your health, and Saturn putting a lot of focus on your health. And I think that this one is interesting because the privilege that the underprivilege that you may feel is that you're not healthy enough. Like maybe you're hearing some sort of diagnosis that doesn't seem right or doesn't fit right. And you may actually, Aquarius is an energy of knowledge. And in the sixth house, I just pick up so much energy to say that you could heal yourself, heal your health. um, that sometimes you may be taking like information from a doctor, what is pressure from the medical vision of how to do things, but you know that there's another way that you can do it. And so that knowledge that you can bring to the table, that knowledge of yourself, you already know, which gives you the upper hand more than you would realize when it comes to your work, to maybe recognize that sometimes people who have the manager jobs are the ones that have the harder days. Like maybe you'll be able to see how your daily life, even though it's not in a position of authority that you're pressured to be in, that you at least have more control of your days, or at least you're less stressed, because that manager life can create so much stress, having to make sure that you're making everything operate perfectly. So you might be a little bit of the black sheep at work, and people may not see you fit to be a role player, but that could be the very thing that makes you enjoy your daily life more than everybody else. So find your privilege in that sixth house where Saturn in Aquarius is. Now, in the seventh house, Saturn in Aquarius is moving um, through an individual one-on-one situation. And so this way can be peer pressure more individually from the partner for you to gain some sense of, um, loyalty or commitment that they feel that you're not giving, really pressuring you to maybe say yes to a marriage or something like that. But off of the individualism, it could be on a more group level, like the people in your lives are just pressuring you to get married, or people are pressuring you to that you don't have a partner and you still aren't even close to courtship. So I'm saying, like, you could be in a place where you feel underprivileged because you're you're in a space where you don't have a lot of options. You can feel so underprivileged in the seventh house. And then there's also the open enemies factor, which makes that peer pressure more volatile sometimes. So what I would say is that you have to seek for your privilege. If you are in a partnership but not having commitment, maybe the privilege is a healthy attachment that you have, right? Maybe you have a more healthier way of looking at attachment and codependency, and that you can bring more to the table than being pressured to be more committed, because Aquarius is a loyal sign. It's fixed. So there is a level of commitment that's emanating from you, but it just doesn't look like how everybody else would want it to. And let's say you're in a position where you're not even with a marriage partner, and the whole pressure is, why haven't you got married yet? Well, maybe there is something very important that you are doing with your life path, which is um, becoming a more whole person before you find that person, find that mirror, right? Maybe there's some sort of, because this challenges the fourth house. So maybe then there's some sort of toxic way that people have dated in your family that you're trying to avoid, and you're really trying to push past through. So Saturn in Aquarius, there's a lot of privilege in the restriction of you getting married right away. And if you can find that, you'll really align yourself to working towards becoming the type of person that you would want to marry, becoming the type of person that you would want to marry. Now, in the eighth house, Saturn in Aquarius is very deeply connected to sexual energy and around groups. So there might be peer pressure to be sexy or to share your intimate self with people. And this could be discomforting because this is a place where you hold your most privacy to yourself. So being more revealing and more open on a sexual level can be difficult in the eighth house, because sex is one of the things in life that can push you through a psychological fear or discomfort. All right, so let's say if you don't really like being in a strip club and you're invited to your friend's bachelorette or bachelor party, then maybe this might be something where you're having to deal with that peer pressure to show up and to show out, to be a part of it. So this can be one where you can still be an example of morality. It could be one where you're still an example of self transforming and healing. So, also being comfortable with being open enough to learn, right? Having that grace of being open enough to learn about things that you may not know, because the eighth house is a place of taboo, but also being strong enough to trust yourself, right? And to not abide by any sort of act that would pull you from your truest self in the eighth house. And that's your privilege in being, the one under pressure. Now, in the ninth house, Saturn in Aquarius is putting you around of groups of maybe, gurus or teachers, people who have a lot of know-it-all energy and putting a lot of pressure on your mental self. They might be looking to see how much you know or what is the credit of your wisdom. And so you may not feel like you have that. Like maybe you weren't trained, maybe you didn't have the education to back it up. So the peer pressure to be a certain way of knowledge or certain credibility of knowledge can be evident here. And so the privilege that you would have is through your unique way that you learned, right? Because sometimes the group is so conditioned to learn or to do things in one way that they can't see that, the person who made the textbook had an agenda or something. So your ability to have had less of the credible credits of knowledge, but still be a being and an entity of knowledge is going to help you here and can help you if you're able to really seek your privilege and what is it that makes you wise, even if you can't necessarily prove it. Now, in the 10th house, Aquarius here is about your career. So this is connected to your following, and it's connected to just the thing that you are leaving behind, the thing that you want to be remembered for. And maybe you are feeling a lot of pressure to really think about those things. This could also be, between this placement and the 8th house, could be a what am I leaving behind kind of energy. And no matter the age, you might really come to terms with, I got to take this life thing serious with Saturn moving directly in the 10th house. Like, I got to think more seriously about my presence in the world. That's that energy. So you may feel like you don't have that yet, or you don't even know how to get it. You don't even know what your career is, or you have the career, but it's not enough. It's not really doing the puncture that you wanted it to do. So you'll have to be recognizing the Aquarian lessons that are happening here with Saturn moving, in which the whole world is changing. And so even what you thought was a career could be out of business. Everything that you thought was the right way to leave and to work on your legacy could be shifting right now. And so you having the underhand can showcase a new way of being known. I mean, even if you think about fame, like fame is a big theme here with Saturn in the 10th house and Saturn moving direct now in your 10th house. What are the downfalls of fame? What are the things that are not so great about it, and why you being privileged because you're not in that high position yet, that you're able to protect yourself from, that you're able to be protected from. So seeing and recognizing that privilege, I think, will be useful here. Now, Saturn in Aquarius moving in direct in the 11th house, this is going to be deeply connected to your actual friendships that you're dealing with today, and how they're helping and how you're moving to become something in society. This is total frat boy, sorority girl energy. There's definitely something that you guys share, a bond that makes you so connected. And yet there seems to be a disconnect in being able to maybe grow together. There seems to be a disconnect with who's in charge, like the hierarchy. The train is moving behind me, so you guys just let me know if you can't hear me, and I'll just wait until it passes. So just let me know. Uh, so yeah, the underprivileged might be feeling like you people as a group are being seen in a bad light. So it's like an identity with everyone feeling like they haven't achieved something or gotten to a certain level yet. And there's a lot of fight between autonomy and group thinking that will happen here, because this is the natural placement for Aquarius to be. So the privilege that I feel like you're fighting may be like being in some sort of group setting where you'll be exposed to the fact that you guys have not achieved something together, or that you just don't have your shit together as a group or a unit, or that, you know, there's a hierarchy that's not being followed. Like if someone is supposed to be the leader, everyone is supposed to move according to that person. We designated you the leader of the team, you know, and you know there could be also politics around that happen here. This is not Saturn. This is the natural placement, so this is where everything is really showing what this transit is about, you know. So you guys can almost apply everything that's happening with the 11th house on top of your house, because it's about group dynamics. It's about your connection to each other. So just because you have a soul connection with a team does not necessarily mean that that connection that you have is what is helping you to move forward, right? So you have a very distinct thing, which is time on your side, but you may not feel that you do. You may feel like there's a pressure for you guys to get it and get it now, you know, but you have more time on your side to recondition what that bond needs to be, because the bond itself may be what is not allowing you to move forward, right? So if Joe has always been, you know, the silly one of the group, maybe Joe has now progressed into being more of the leadership type, that everyone wants to start listening to Joe about what we should move forward. So just considering everyone's roles, and are you fit for the roles that you've been assigned to, and taking that time to do that, it's on your side, right? You don't want to go out into the world and you're not ready with your group project, basically. And then finally, Saturn in the 12th house with Aquarius moving direct is going to have a lot of peer pressure to be soulfully whole, right? This is the place where, you know, if you're a Christian, someone will be like, well, you've got to be a good Christian 100% of the time, 24/7. Or even like with astrology, it's like you've got to be a perfect astrologer. So there could be a pressure to meet the needs of that role that you're supposed to be playing in your spiritual conquests and with your spiritual peers. And so this could also be with even the non-visible. So this could be the angels or the ancestors that are around you, that you feel they want you to go in a certain way. Let's say your ancestors were slaves, and they're working through you to, you know, live out the karma. There may be a no, you know, I don't want to. I don't want to. You know, it could be a very internal place. And so the 12th house is tough. When Saturn is moving through the 12th house transit, I find that you may not be appearing to everyone else as even having any sort of issue. Or it could be the complete opposite. So you could be appearing to be like absolutely losing your shit, because it's an internal thing with an unseen entity when we're looking at the 12th house. But then you could also appear to be the person that is really looking like they hold it all together. I've seen this more in my life as an example of people that I know who have Saturn in the 12th house. They seem to almost be like warriors, and like they're stern with it, like showing like, no, this is the way to be. This is the way to be, right? You may feel like you are underprivileged because you can't make a mistake. You can't make a spiritual mistake. You can't, you can't, like, I'm talking about the seven sins right now on my channel. You can't, slip up and indulge in your, in one of your sins. You give yourself no ability to. So the privileged people are the ones who can, and you may feel like you're really just struggling with being spiritually perfect, spiritually sound leader and vision for everyone else to be inspired by. So this is a place of really embracing your flaws on a deep level, and making things okay to make mistakes, making it okay to make mistakes. So now that we've come to the end, the biggest thing here is about recognizing where you are privileged. And so my special message to you, for anyone who stayed to the end, is that the karmic law, and this is what I'm talking about with the seven sins, the karmic law of being in privilege is recognizing where you're privileged and giving and feeling the feeling of giving. And this is why Saturn transits are so difficult, because we will naturally fall into a place of lack where Saturn is, because of the karma that can feel with it. And so we may feel more connected to the enlightenment or the negative mindset or the evil eye that we may have where Saturn is, right? So shifting that and recognizing privilege, because Saturn is the energy of hierarchy. So there's an evident hierarchy that you are, but you are not seeing it. You're not living it. You're not, there's this thing on TikTok called power is power. You're just not choosing your power, where Saturn is quite often. Quite often someone comes in and they are a mirror of authority, because the universe is trying to show you that you are not choosing your power. You're making external things more of the authority for you. And so wherever Saturn is ever, it's always about recognizing your own authority, and getting through the blocks that keep you undermining yourself. So seeing and seeking for your privilege is the key goal, because then we can start to do some crazy, wacko things with flipping the whole way that you see things. That's what it requires. So you're going from a mindset of I'm the victim, I'm underprivileged, to flipping yourself to I am privileged, and then how can I give back? That's a hard road to travel, but the easier that you make it for yourselves, the more that Saturn works in your favor. So for those who had the gall to stick around, I promise you that this is the answer for this transit. And if you have a Saturn return, this is also the answer for what you're going through. Okay, if you guys would like any readings from me, just go ahead and email me. I'll leave it down in the description below, and we can do audio readings, which are available for I usually return them within a day or two. Okay, so thank you so much. Peace and love.